be Joe Musgrove. It's going to be Dustin May. You're going to be on ESPN, or you're going to be on ESPN2?
Hey, Darren. I'm going to go with ESPN. And, yeah, I'm not going to – don't plan to, at least right now, be there in person. But I think it'll be nice to check out national broadcast on the main channel.
All right. So you're not in all that data-driven nerd talk, huh? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I can be from time to time, but don't get too many chances to watch the Padres on normal ESPN, so I think I'll take it up. But, yeah, I might flip back and forth, but mostly ESPN.
I love it. Dennis has a great piece at The Athletic. I realize I say that every single time he's on the show and when he's not on the show, and it's about Ryan Weathers. And it was written before Ryan Weathers pitched last night against the Dodgers. And the headline is Padres rookie Ryan Weathers, the major's youngest pitcher, has spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Again, it was written before Padres and Dodgers last night. And there's this great quote from his dad, David, who says, "I don't know what the Lord has in store for his future." Talking about pitching in a hostile environment at Dodger Stadium. "I don't know what the Lord has in store for his future, but I do know that it's been very well prepared for him to be able to go out and execute it. It's just in his blood." What a great line that is, especially, Dennis, combined with what it was we saw last night from Ryan Weathers.
Yeah, I think everything he's done to this point shows that, sometimes that combination of major leaguer and a major league son, sometimes it does really work out, because he was, as you know, in the clubhouse from a very young age, and he was hanging out with Ken Griffey Jr. Actually, his dad said Ken Griffey would often wrestle with his son in the clubhouse. So, once you have that experience, and I know at age 8, you're probably not fully aware of how big that is, but once you have that experience, and there's even an anecdote in that story, I'm sure you saw that he got booed at Philly when he was 8 years old because he was beaking out fans during batting practice, not giving them souvenirs, batting practice balls, and I guess it just rolled right off his back. Once you have those experiences, nothing really is going to surprise you once you get to the majors. And, he's gone to the majors probably quicker than even he expected, but I think the things that he and his dad worked on for years and years and countless hours, those things are paying off right now.
You also, it's a good story on how he ended up as a pitcher, right? Because there was a time, and there's great connections here with Aaron Harang, a San Diegan, et cetera, that you can go, you should find it at The Athletic. But sometimes, you don't know which way a player, if somebody's got talent, which way he's going to gravitate. And there was a time where Ryan Weathers seemed like he was gravitating more towards the hitting side, right? Like towards being a fielder, and then quickly gravitated back towards the pitching side.
Yeah, and I think you could still see the athleticism he has. I think he's maybe deceptively athletic because he doesn't have the classic super athletic baseball player build, maybe. But you saw last night, he fields his position well. He takes good swings when he's batting for himself. And, yeah, for a lot of years, all the people in Cincinnati, the Reds, and he would spend, hours in the batting cage just watching players hit. And he would go out on the field and hit himself with his dad, launch home runs to the second deck from the outfield. Yeah, he had a future there, a lot of people thought. But, when you're a left-handed pitcher or a left-hander who can throw, which his dad said he prayed for, and, I think when he was 14 and 15, he was that was when his velocity really picked up. And his dad always stressed fastball command, and that's something that he had from a very young age. And, again, you're seeing it come out now. He can place the ball to both sides of the plate, up and down, and right now he's only doing it with two pitches, basically, the fastball and slider. So you wonder what could be possible if he, further develops that slider. And I think he and his dad changed the grip on that in the offseason a little bit, and maybe works a little more on his changeup. He can be, potential mid-rotation or better type of guy in the future for the Padres.
Dennis Lynn from The Athletic is joining us on Extra 1360. Dennis, we remember the circumstances under which Ryan debuted last year. Very unusual. He's a kid. Padres need an arm. They throw him out there, and he pitches great. And what a great way to go into your first offseason after an inning and two-thirds, I believe it was, in the postseason. But in terms of his career arc, he's a first-round pick. Padres obviously thought high enough of him that they kept him at the alternate site all year. But would we think that they themselves might be a bit surprised by this? Like this was probably not projected 1 year ago at this time, and I realize that this is still very much in its infancy stages. But, man, it looks very, very legitimate. I wonder how the Padres feel just about the career arc thus far for Ryan.
Yeah, I think if you had asked them 2 years ago or even a year ago, they would probably admit some surprise this is the way it was going to turn out. But if you look at what happened last summer or last spring, he came in with some really good velocity, and he was throwing a little bit slower when he was drafted. Really good command still, but just the velocity he was at back then, coming out of high school, it was solid, but it wasn't anything special. And then he came back after his first full season in the minors when he had some arm fatigue and he got in better shape. I think he lost some weight up top, and that just gave him more flexibility up top to to have that better range of motion with his fastball. And he came into camp or COVID camp last summer with really good velocity, and he's just even improved on that. He lost even more weight this past offseason, and his dad was saying, I think a lot of the reason a lot of these pitchers get hurt is they lift so heavy upper body. And instead of doing that this offseason, we had him, kind of just do maintenance work up top and focus on his legs and focus on his range of motion up top. So his dad, by his own admission, is very old school arm strengthening, old school, preparation and all that. But in this case, it seems like it's really working for Ryan.
Dennis Lynn joining us on Extra 1360. Let's talk a little bit about Dinelson Lamet. Dennis, what do you're the capital J journalist, what do we know today about Dinelson Lamet?
Not a whole lot different from yesterday, which is kind of, I guess, depending on how you interpret what the Padres said, which is that, he's feeling very, very good, or that's what Jay Stingler said. So I guess we're going to find out more today when he plays catch. They said they're optimistic that after he came out of that game the other day with forearm tightness, that inflammation has gone down and that he's going to be hopefully ready in 10 days. That's obviously with a guy like this, and this is a guy who even people in the organization are saying going into the season, going to spring training, we don't know exactly what to expect from this guy. It was good that he avoided Tommy John surgery back in the fall. Didn't seem like anyone was really, pushing for that, including Dinelson himself, which you can probably understand having gone through it already. But I think it's just going to be up in the air still when he does come back, because the adrenaline, as Jay Stingler has said, is very different between the major leagues and the alternate site. And once you get into those atmospheres, things tend to go wrong a little more than they do in a lower pressure environment. So I think this is still very, very much up in the air, but I guess I can understand why, if he's feeling okay right now, try to keep going.
This might be splitting some hairs here. Just to be thorough, Jay Stingler yesterday said that there was no inflammation. The team's Twitter account said that he was being placed on the 10-day IL with forearm inflammation. Is that as simple as forearm versus elbow? Is that maybe what the perceived disconnect could be in just the terminology that the club is using?
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know what some of these things, like when in spring training, he said that he had avoided basically any damage to his UCL, and doctors told him that by stopping when he did last fall, he avoided needing Tommy John surgery. And then on opening day, you see them put him on the IL, which was expected, but the designation then was UCL strain. And usually when you strain your UCL, there's some kind of maybe even just microscopic tearing, but some tearing of your UCL. So there's even questions there, what's the status of his UCL. But that was curious. I saw that as well. I know you did, but I think maybe it was just not quite the most clear statement that Singler or the Padres are trying to say, or maybe they should have made it more clear in that, he did have some inflammation. Obviously, that's, seems natural when your forearm tightens up and it died down, but I don't think it'd probably be accurate to say there's, absolutely no inflammation, or else they would, have him on the mound right now and he'd be feeling fine to keep pitching. But obviously they're going to try to give this 10 days to calm down, or whatever's going on there, and see if they can get him right and get him back on the mound.
Yeah, I think you said it really well. Yeah, you said that the Padres weren't quite sure what to expect from Dinelson Lamet, and what I think everybody wants. Like, you wouldn't be a decent human being if you didn't want to see Dinelson Lamet return to the mound and have success. That said, I don't get the sense that the Padres really banked on that. Like, to your point, if you don't know what you're going to get out of a guy, it's probably a good idea then to go out and add 3 starting pitchers and maybe fast track some younger guys, right? Like it's not like they were dependent on Dinelson Lamet this season. They were hopeful it would have been great, but Dennis, it sounds very much to me like, we also better have a couple of backup plans here just in case.
Yeah, and I also think they didn't expect him to leave his season debut in 2 innings, so that was almost kind of the worst case scenario. Now, whether this does become the worst case scenario depends on what happens from here. But yeah, you're exactly right. They went out and added those 3 starting pitchers, and so far it looks like it's working out well for the most part. And Ryan Weathers emerging, continuing to emerge. That's a good development for them. Mackenzie Gore's at the alternate site, but they really don't have much depth beyond that in the starting rotation. Obviously, Chris Paddock is kind of an enigma still. He needs to pick it up, or else, that there was talk that when Adrian Morejon was healthy, Chris Paddock is the kind of guy who, if he didn't pick it up, AAA might be a consideration at that point. But with Morejon going down as well, and things up in the air with Lamet, they really do need Paddock to step up. And then, with Lamet, he's such a hard worker that you can't help but root for him. But I think they were of the mind that, this might not be a very long-term thing if he does get back on the mound, because he's had a recent Tommy John and recent elbow injury, and he throws very hard. So, when you combine all those things, sometimes bad things happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the sport. It can be very mean-spirited at times. You mentioned Mackenzie Gore, Dennis, and that's the first name that popped up when we watched the Nelson Lamet walk off the other day. I'm live on the air. People are already saying, well, I guess it's time for Gore. Yeah, and you got Weathers, and Paddock is showing some signs of improvement, which is nice. But now there seems to be a dialogue about Mackenzie Gore and timelines with him. And I know Jace was asked about it yesterday, and hemmed and hawed a little bit, didn't give an answer that made us that gave us that and made us smarter about Mackenzie Gore. What do you sense right now is his status? Like, what's the deal with Mackenzie at this point?
Well, it's only been fewer than 4 weeks since we last saw him in spring training, and clearly in spring training he wasn't ready for the majors, or at least ready in the sense that he could come up and pitch in a rotation for a team that hopes to get to the playoffs. But his command was just all over the place in spring training, and some of this is to be expected. Had a full year off from actual competition against other teams, and he has a pretty complicated delivery, so there's a lot of maintenance there that needs to be done. But I've heard he's looked better so far at the alternate site. Now again, just like with Lamet, that's a very different environment than the majors, and Mackenzie's obviously never pitched in the majors, so I think minor league season's supposed to start in a couple weeks here. Maybe you send him to El Paso and hope that he gets his command under control there if it isn't already, and at least shows it against upper level hitters before you bring him up. And now maybe something happens with Lamet or someone else, or Paddock, before then, and you feel compelled to bring him up. They're not going to bring him up before they feel he's ready, and he's also very young like Weathers, so they're not going to push him too hard innings-wise this year. So I think you're still looking at, May call it being the earliest possible scenario for Mackenzie. And I think at the same time, the Padres would like to see him show consistent command against upper-level hitters for a little while before they bring him up. So maybe it'll be a little longer than that.
Right. So circumstances being what they might be, do you get the sense though that they would hesitate to bring him up? If heaven forbid you ended up losing another guy or two, or you had to search, you had to find somebody to start a baseball game, or do you think that they would just turn within and you'd get Craig Stammen? Like, do you sense there's some hesitancy about if they needed him here in the short term that they would turn to him?
I don't know about hesitancy. I do think just the situation they're in right now, their rotation depth after Weathers and Paddock and Gore, there really isn't just much there. So yeah, maybe there's a necessity for him to come up if something else happens, God forbid, in the next couple of weeks. But I do think there might be a little slight just let's give him just a little more time. He's still very young, and he's still he's not far removed from that spring training when he just didn't look that good and just didn't have command. His stuff looked good. He just didn't really know where he was placing it, unlike Weathers, who, as you can clearly see, he knows where he's putting the ball pretty much at all times, even if he's out of the zone. He has command that way. And Mackenzie just didn't have that, but he does still have the higher upside than Ryan Weathers, just with 4 above average or potentially above average pitches. So with a guy like that, you don't want to rush him, and you want to do what's best for him in his career, and you have to weigh that still, like you said, with the need to try to win right now. So I think it's a very interesting question. I just think Padres are kind of crossing their fingers that nothing else happens to the rotation between now and whenever they feel that Mackenzie is ready to come up.
These Padre Dodger games, huh? They've certainly delivered. They have lived up to the hype through the 4 of them, huh?
Yeah, and I think last night's game was probably, in my opinion, the best of the 4 or 5 or however many games it's been. It feels like the season's been going for a while now, but just the Padres played a pretty clean game, and obviously had that double play at the end. The bullpen with Milo Pagan faltered a little bit, but those guys have been worked very hard. You can argue they've been worked too hard. They pitched the most innings of any bullpen in the majors, but just timely hitting that they got, and the Dodgers, posing a threat like they always do in the late part of the game. I think with that double play that Jake Cronenworth started, and seeing couple big hits from Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis, who looks like he's coming around a little bit. I thought it was a really well-played game and probably the best of the season series so far.
You talked a little bit about the bullpen, something we discussed on the show. And I guess now this is season number 2, right, for Drew Pomeranz out of the Padres bullpen since he's come back, since he signed the free agent deal. This is just what he is, and he's just a guy who's, for the most part, going to be every other day, every third day, 1 inning at a time. This is what they signed up for? They're good with it?
I think they're hoping for more, but I think it's pretty well known he's not always been the most durable guy, even after he switched from the rotation to the bullpen after he got traded in 2016. And obviously now he's back and signed to a 4-year, $34 billion deal. So that, speaks pretty highly of what they expect of him. But when you sign deals like that, or you give out deals like that, a lot of times teams kind of look at the first couple of years of, if it's a 4-year deal like this, and hope for, a lot of production on the front end. And if the guy falls off on the back end, it's kind of the cost of business sometimes. But right now, yeah, it looks like he's been dealing with some physical things, and it's definitely concerning for a bullpen that, again, has pitched a lot of innings, and he hasn't, appeared in many games this year. He had that shoulder issue that, maybe is still lingering a little bit, although obviously they feel like he's, good enough to come out the other night. But yeah, I don't think he's a guy that you can count on anytime soon to, consistently go back to back, which is why it's really important that, someone like Blake Snell goes deep in the game, and Yu Darvish goes deep in the game, and Joe Musgrove and those guys. But yeah, I think it's something to watch between the rotation and the bullpen, just the health situation overall, because just from where I sit, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe they have, a guy like Mason Thompson or someone else, a reliever down in the minors, who's going to come throw a lot of innings this year, but they're going to be stretched to cover all these innings between the rotation and the bullpen with some of these health questions.
Dennis, last thing, as the Padres reminded us on social media last night, it's April. I don't know what point they were making with the capital lowercase thing, but their players will get up there and go, well, it's April. Like we've got a long season ahead of us, and then the flip side is, it's only April, but we are playing in these super intense games, et cetera. How do you shake out on the significance of these games in particular? We understand elevated expectation, unprecedented anticipation for the season, et cetera. Never seen a payroll like this before. But where do you shake out on the whole conversation about how meaningful these games actually are?
I think generally, if this were kind of another team, I would be more inclined to say, yeah, it really isn't such a big deal. I still kind of fall maybe a little more on that side than it's time to panic if they suddenly lose 4 games in a row, which, they recently just had a stretch kind of like that. But since it's the Padres, and since last season, although very promising, was only 60 games, and, they just haven't proven it as a team before. I think it's obvious that they have a lot of talent on the field, but, since it's the Padres and everyone knows the history of the Padres, I think these April games are a little more important than they might be for another club that's, consistently proven it year after year. And I think the Yankees out east, obviously they're playing as poorly as anyone, but I would feel pretty confident in betting that they're going to turn it around sooner than later. And just with the Padres, they just don't have that track record. I know you can't look at the roster and compare it to prior rosters, but again, they do have some pretty big health question marks, and you don't want to look back in September, October, and look at a couple games that cost you here and there. And they're really, aside from these Dodgers games and the Brewers, obviously the Brewers have really good pitching. You can argue that they had a fairly easy schedule aside from those Dodgers games, so you got to take advantage of those. And again, you don't really want to be looking back in hindsight and saying we should have won this game or this game that kept us out of potential playoff spot in the end.
Dennis, you are the man. We appreciate you very much. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.